We can set up. I think they voted on it.
Actually, we just got full.
That's at 6 inches on big stone already. Don't venture out too far.
Yeah.
Already said they were pulling first out there already quite a bit.
No doubt. That lake is an awesome early ice trail.
Yeah. We got a good message going with the dudes, a good trip.
EX5 is going on. Yeah, I'm getting it. It's the rotary flasher. I went through a crap already.
No, I didn't.
I like organized mine yesterday actually.
Nice.
I bought a flasher for my cousin.
Sweet.
Trade for storage, so it worked out.
Yeah,
It's pretty nice. It's digital.
cool.
You can do the readout as it goes, so you can like see how it's written out.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen that on
He traded it way too cheap, but he needs storage, so.
LX. VX1P. Saw it on the first one with that memory and everything, and that was a pretty badass. So, I don't know what the he's watching. It's basically a camera without being a camera.
Maybe it's like 6 inches.
Yeah. Do you sit in the Hy-Vee parking lot and drink beer with your buddies all day and go and buy some fillets?
So you put it right in the little baby spot in the cart. You can just twist them off and throw them. When you pay for them,
He chased the tanks as they were like in their whole life.
you don't get blood.
That's part of the fun.
He loves that. It was fun.
Fresh caviar?
Honestly, what scares me about ice fishing is when I go ice fishing, not ice fishing.
It's throwing down.
It's just freaky.
I grew up throwing rocks on the ice.
But if you're like, if you're on Shavers
I also fell through it.
or something like that, forget it. There's no, that's not the ice's fault, Chad.
It was the idiot that was walking on the river.
Well, that's, yeah.
A's walked right across, I walked across, get to the end, and I fell up to my waist. The river was over me, like knee high, like we used knee high rubber boots.
Yeah.
In the channel. I couldn't
Then you hit the channel.
carry a muzzle over.
Ooh. Keep powder dry? Sounds awesome.
What?
Keep powder dry.
I threw it.
Which is probably the right thing to do. But I don't say that about you very often.
I was just glad it was me that fell through, not Ace, because he was good enough to
Okay,
pray.
so the B is pro.
That's what scared me.
Which I'm guessing means it has
Like, I don't
a
put that on.
How's it going, Mr. Band? Raffle champ.
The thing was got aggressive.
It's cleaned up.
And it was one of those days.
Noah put one ticket in the refrigerator.
Really?
He won one 2 years ago. So he's like,
Lay down.
just as
It's like Griffin won the heated stadium seat, the Vikings on it. He only put one on.
So 2 days behind.
Do we know if the gas is coming?
Is it set?
It is 7.
No, it's.
Who's on the phone?
Kelly's on the phone. Kelly, can you hear us all right?
Yeah.
All right.
I don't know as if anyone else was.
Sam's on it? Brittany?
No,
Sam's at wrestling.
I really didn't think so.
Okay.
No, I think we're good.
Okay. Well, since it's just an informal work session, we don't need to bang the gavel or do anything that's official like that, so I'll let Steve take
I
the
guess
floor.
I just put this together and, basically it kind of it all started like, I guess, Ike and Kurt kind of came in one day and talked about how in those older levels the baseball kind of was going down and, readiness for Legion, I guess, or whatever you want to say, preparedness type thing. And that's kind of where it all came from. And then when I went and kind of called it neighboring towns to see what they did, and we kind of went from there. And then yeah, we've had, I don't know, a lot of discussion in Parks and Recs meeting, I will say. You know, and we kind of last time came up with that, and then you guys. So this I just put together to, you know, these are things that we had talked about as a group. You know, and I don't know. I'm on the fence with it still. I think there's pros and cons, like it says here. So, you know, I'm up for anything. To be honest with you, I just think we need to make that decision for those parents or whatever of 14 years, because that, you know, registration comes out in January and stuff, so that way they can look into other options if that's their choice, I guess. So, I don't know if you want to go through this list here or kind of keep it open. That's completely up to you guys. But you know.
Well, the fifth reason for is the most compelling. If it doesn't work, blame Steve and change it back.
Well, I agree. I'm in for that one for sure. Well, no, and you know, and that's my thought process is, you know, if those coaches are asking for it, I guess if we tried it and it doesn't work, I mean.
How long have we been doing the tryouts and the traveling team facilitating that?
How long?
Yeah.
About 10 years.
And why did we start doing that originally?
Because we had a broken baseball system in town. We had teams that kids would split up into the best kids that play on one team, and then all the other kids kind of quit playing. That didn't get picked for the best team. And then we had a group that did that, and then by the time they got to 15, 16 baseball, half of them decided they were going to play travel basketball and travel football camps. Just changed what they were doing. And then we didn't have a 15, 16 team in Lennox. Chancellor had one that made the state tournament, but those kids played over in Chancellor instead of being a part of our program, because at the time they were when they were younger, they were told they weren't good enough to be on a good team because they split them up. So that's why I kind of went to this format, but still to give everyone an opportunity to play baseball and also still have that competitive part of it.
So just try to make the competitive part of it fair? Is that what the intention is? Instead of like just a bunch of dads on the team?
Yeah, it's to try to keep as many kids out for baseball as we possibly could.
I think.
What's the purpose? I guess what's the purpose of us doing the tryout game? That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Because then we can keep our kids that otherwise would go to Sioux Falls and play in a super competitive team.
So we're just facilitating the creation of that travel team and not relying on just a couple dads to just
No, we
take
hired,
that initiative.
like last year was the
Right.
first year we hired some college coaches to come
Yeah.
down and completely do everything, make all the decisions,
But then who coaches that team?
the dads.
Then it's kind of based on, who is on that team, who wants to volunteer to do that. Correct.
Like for I can only speak to 10U, but like for 10U, it was myself, Jade Bering, Chris Hansen, and Baronity. I mean, just dads.
So what if a dad wanted to coach that team and his kid didn't make the tryout? Can he play
Can the kid
on the
play?
travel team
No.
or not?
Could the kid play? No. The dad could definitely coach, though. There would be someone who could take that. Yeah.
And we've had it in the past where the kids that didn't make the travel team, there was a dad that stepped up and actually formed another team and took the second,
Yeah.
the kids who didn't make it, whoever wanted to play to a couple tournaments.
And we were really close to doing that again this year at the 10 game anyways, for sure.
When we talked about that at the last Parks and Rec, that just because you're not on a tournament team, the city, in the policies, it still states that they will help financially wise if they want to go to enter tournaments, etc. So they can, their team doesn't have to be a tournament team to play the tournament per se. As long as the coaches and parents and kids of that set team wants to go compete.
I think the city pays for 2 of them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we said we would 2 tournaments, 3 tournaments per team, 2 in each age group. And, as long as players/coaches are available.
I guess I was really on the fence for a long time, and I kind of talked to Chad about how the almost seemed to me like they had gone back and forth and tried something similar to this, I guess, not necessarily going full budget, but didn't it used to be, correct me if I'm wrong, like Lennox Baseball Association or something like
Yeah,
that?
that
said
was the
before,
creation of the Lennox Baseball Association. A part of it was to fundraise and rebuild the baseball field, the big baseball field. And then part of it, I believe, this is before I got here, but part of it, I believe, was to help facilitate some of the team, like what the Park and Rec program does now.
So what's changed from then to now is pretty profound. Then, as I understand it, and this is anecdotal, I didn't experience it personally as my kids were younger than those that were part of that group, but they had actually told kids that, yeah, you can be on the squad, but you're not going to play. We've got a group. And when enough kids had heard that, there was a parent that was PO'd, and that's why they went to Chancellor and started the Chancellor Wildcats. And they had enough for one team in Chancellor. There was enough for one team in Lennox until, as Chad mentioned, it dissolved for other interests and whatever, where that team in Chancellor really bonded as the outsiders and really made that their rallying cry. Where it's a profound change is our head count. Now in Lennox, we don't have 20 boys going out for baseball at 13, 14. We now have, what was the last year number, Steve?
And probably about 40.
Roughly 40
Roughly
kids.
40.
Right. So you don't have one team and you cherry pick. You've got 3 teams that we fielded this year, which gives us options and causes problems. Problems in that kids want to win. And when we divide the talent up as we do as a Park and Rec group, you pilot this ship. We want everyone to be included. We want talent spread around. We want players to be taught different positions, not just pigeonholed in one spot, and given opportunities. Where if you have guys that are now spread so thin, they end up losing all their games because they don't have a run of 4 or 5 guys in the lineup that can hit the ball and push runners across. And that causes some frustration. The win there is that if there was going to be a group that broke off and started the Lennox Baseball Association or became affiliated with BFW and formed their own group, there would be enough still here for Park and Rec to have our inclusive concept in place for those that don't make it. They wouldn't have to look for other communities to move forward with their baseball ideas. They could still be here in Lennox where they live, on the field that they want to play on, just not with the boys that went out for and moved on to that top team.
And I think part of the problem with doing it that way is, I think that's kind of what happened to our softball program. And then we started seeing declines in numbers because all of a sudden they were pulling people from 8U up to play 12U, like the best 3 or 4 girls, and then it just, I mean, that's, right? Isn't that kind of what decimated the softball program?
Yeah.
And it's kind of starting to get back on the uptick a little bit.
I think our teams are bigger this year, or last year, than they had been in the previous 5 or 6, for sure.
My daughter came through the softball program here in Lennox, and she experienced that fracturing. It was, you get to a certain age and you join a competitive team. If you want to develop, other than mom or dad teaching you, you need to get to a coach that can coach you and show you how to be a better softball player. And that involves not here half the time.
And my daughter played on the Chancellor team because she wasn't one of the good ones. So I was told that. And so she played for Chancellor. So, I mean, that.
For me, still, the proof is kind of in the pudding that once we started this route with the baseball programs, I mean, at those top levels, we've been, I would say, pretty blessed. I mean, we've won multiple state championships, got 3rd place the year, a couple not too far, 2 years ago, and we're, in 2 one-run games away from advancing to the state tournament again this year. I mean, I'm probably as competitive as anybody in the room, but I mean, we have that aspect when they get to 15, 16 and above. I mean, to me, all you're gonna do is cut out the bottom 20 to 25 kids, and in 3 or 4 years, we'll have a problem if the same thing, if history repeats itself.
So, softball is going to be sanctioned by the SDHSAA at beginning 2023, which will then make this relevant on the softball side even more so, because you'll have a pool of players age 8th grade to senior year that will be on a high school team. That will then be broken out into varsity, JV, C,
It's like our baseball team now.
without including 13, 14.
Yep.
So, when is it right to flip the switch is where I'm going with that, because with softball, it's being flipped when they get to high school or 8th grade.
Yeah.
With baseball, we want to hold on to, no, we want to keep these kids at this level.
Well, how old are the 14-year, what are 14-year kids?
Freshmen?
Seventh grade.
8th grade.
Yeah, 8th
It's
freshman,
Yeah.
in between, kind of. And we talked about that at the Parks and Rec meeting, is like, what is that age to say, like,
There was a lot of talk about
now
that.
it's not, fun baseball anymore, like,
Right.
and not that you don't want it to be fun, but you know what I mean, like, it's,
Yeah.
we have kids that are working hard to be at it, and you're just showing up at the game,
Right.
Wait, at what point, if you can answer that, let me know. And that's, I think, an impossible,
Right.
you know.
And that's why
And
I
as you
really
know-
have this beer to talk it through.
Right, no, as far as junior high sports, however, like junior high basketball, for example, there's a A team and a B team. Those are these kids we're talking about right now. So, I mean, I think they get that concept of like, okay, I'm not on the A team, but I still get to play on the B team, and I can maybe get to the A team type thing. I don't know. But again,
And that's in 7th grade.
correct.
Something?
You're
Yeah,
welcome.
go ahead, Kelly.
Okay, thank you. Well, okay, I just wanted to say my experience with this 14U baseball thing, because that's my son's age. So last year, nobody really enjoyed baseball. I mean, I say that they just lost every game, and so it wasn't enjoyable for any of them. It just wasn't fun, and I just think something needs to change, or it would be nice if something could change where you could really, you have a program for the more skilled players, and then, and something for the kids that aren't as skilled. I just want it to be enjoyable for everybody. And my own kid is like, he could go either way. I mean, he could easily not make this, A team or whatever, but I don't really like to consider it, I don't know, I don't like to look at it as an A team thing, but they just didn't have any fun last year, and I think that the parents really, truly just, they want their kids to enjoy the game. And they're gonna, I guess I don't know what they're gonna do for sure, but they're not gonna stick with Park and Rec. Just because if the kids aren't gonna have if they're not enjoying the game, they're not gonna play under the Park and Rec umbrella anymore.
So my question to you would be, if we go with the A, and it is an A, a B, and a C team, if you're gonna split them up by talent level, I mean, that's ultimately what it is. So then, the Park and Rec board would then say that the experience that those 12 kids have is more important than the experience of the other 28 kids, or 26 kids that aren't on those teams, because they're gonna end up playing the same teams, and then you're gonna take the 12 best players and put them all on one team, and then you're gonna take the 26 less talented kids and split them up into 2 teams. I mean, baseball, you need to have people that can throw strikes to win. It's not like football or basketball where there's a clock that expires. If you put a team out there that can't get an out, in theory, the game will go on forever.
Right, okay, so what are we gonna do, let's say that team breaks off? Okay, then you're still stuck with that same scenario, correct? I mean,
And
are
if
we
you
just
look at
kind
it,
of walked in our hands of that one team? I mean, we're still gonna have all those extra kids.
yeah, and then whenever in 5 years when those kids get up there and half of the kids that broke off, just like they have in the past, decide that they're gonna play basketball or football or just quit playing baseball, now we have 8 kids playing baseball instead of, we don't have enough to field the team. I mean, I don't understand, if you take the 12 best players and you split them up evenly across 3 teams, in theory, more, roughly half of your lineup would be the best kids. And then you just kind of fill it in with, quote unquote, the less talented kids.
You know, it seems like last year, there were kids who, on a team that they got to play like the last inning, that didn't seem that much fun for them, but they didn't obviously care, but yeah,
Do we have any options on who we play?
Right now, the 13-14U is not in like a league. They kind of are, I don't know, it's kind of freelance teams that all get together and put a schedule together is kind of what it is. So, I mean,
There's a one-night meeting at the clubhouse at the golf course in Deersburg where all the coaches converge with calendars and figure out when they can play each
And
other.
that's 13-14, not just 14?
that's 14, correct. 14U, which is 13-14U.
Okay.
Right.
There's
So
not-
you
yeah,
schedule 2 games against Deersburg, 1 against their A team, 1 against their B team. You schedule games against Dakota Valley, and the
Depending
other
on how
coaches
many
that show
teams,
up.
right, who has them and
Right.
things.
Right.
Like, and that's the one thing, so surrounding towns, they're either only big enough to have one team, or they split it by age, like all the 14 kids are on this team, all the 13 kids are on this team, or they do like a A and a B. And that's where we're running into the issue of, I don't know, like for example, Tri-Valley. Tri-Valley has an A team, and they bring kids from 12U up to play 14U if they're good enough. So like they mix them all together, which we are not doing that. I will say, like I'm not for that at all. But that we're in that balance of we're playing teams that want to be competitive, but we want to be rec. I mean, so then we are getting beat, and then it's frustrating for you know what I mean? Like the coaches, for example, I talk to them and it's just, I mean, why are they putting in their time so much to go and get 10 run? I mean,
Kelly, has the group looked at the I-29 League?
yeah. Yep, and we could join that, correct. Yep, and we could.
And that's all A squads. I mean,
Correct, yeah, we would not want to join that with rec, or we would,
Right.
yeah, that would be no fun at all. Those are all,
I think that's something we even brought up in the
Correct,
last year.
correct.
Was
and that would be a possibility
Consider-
if we choose to go along with the tournament team. I talked to, I cannot remember his name, but he said, oh yeah, just let me know in that February range, and he gets it kind of all together. I will say the great thing about joining that league is they do all the umpires, they do all the scheduling, they do all everything.
But I think the teams that are involved are not park and rec squads
Correct.
from all those communities, right?
Correct.
So they're an entity outside, or each town has an entity outside of their park and rec that handles that.
Yep.
So that's where this has to kind of be guided. If that's gonna happen, that's exactly, I think, what Kelly's kind of alluding to,
Right.
is that it would move away from the park and rec model and into its own deal. Which would leave us as park and rec with the other 28 kids as what we'll have for our program.
and I don't believe that we would even be able to find a coach for those kids, but we've got the same dads who coach.
Right.
So I think that once those dads went with their kids, I mean, that's a whole other can of worms, but I don't even know who would coach those other kids,
And that's the other
which
issue
is
if you put
unfortunate
all the
because
talented
they're
kids
not,
on the team.
I mean, they deserve to play too.
So with that comment, that says we need to try and keep them in park and rec if the coaches are leaving. But then the flip side is she said they're not staying.
and I, you know, I'm talking with Mr. Ike or Darren, and he's kind of said that. I mean, they just, and I will say, there's that group of kids, there is some pretty good baseball players. They're all really good friends. I don't blame them for wanting to play with each other. I mean, I don't know how, I mean, why wouldn't they?
Right.
That's kind of what I say.
I know I'm saying they can't, but it just.
No, and I agree.
It just can't be in our program.
I agree.
And then if they go outside of the program, just like, you know, the softball teams that do, they get last dibs on the field, they provide the city a certificate of insurance, they buy their own equipment, they buy their own baseballs, they pay their own umpires, and they're the last ones that get any chance to use the field, so they get Sunday at 2 p.m. for games.
How is it that they be the
Okay,
last?
that doesn't seem fair though.
No, how will they be the last?
Because anyone, the way it's always been, the way we've always done it is whoever the newest team is that's not part of the Park and Rec organization goes to the bottom of the list.
But we all pay taxes. I mean, I don't think that.
We've
You know,
done
that's
that.
There's no rule that we.
We've done it to softball for how many years? It's been done to the girls softball. It's been done to the girls softball
That
teams.
doesn't mean that has to be the rule. I mean, we can discuss that.
Right.
Well, no, because one of the
No,
reasons,
right.
one of the reasons why they want to go away from it is because it's so hard to get on the field. So now we have kids that are part of our program that we facilitate that don't get first dibs on the baseball field.
Now, I wouldn't say it's field stuff. I think it's practice times, kind of like that.
Well, you have to practice on the field at that level.
Well, no, I'm just saying, I think the field is open. Like, and we've even discussed this. The big field has time to be open.
Plenty.
It's a matter of getting those kids there at that age, because now they're starting high school sports, which they got basketball, it's on Tuesday nights or whatever, and then there's a football, Friday, Wednesday night lights, and then there's a camp they go to here. So if you're trying to schedule your rec practice and your tourney practice, now you're trying to get two night, and that's where they run into the problem. I don't know as if it's fields time. The lower levers, yes, we need another small field, but the big field I think is pretty.
I'm just saying that the way we have treated in the past,
Correct.
the female softball teams that are not part of our program is they get last dibs after everyone else has. And it goes in order of when they were created. So, I mean, I'm just so we're laying it all out there.
No, and I guess just this is my obviously one summer experience. Last summer, I don't believe we had any issues with that type of thing that I know of. So, as far as schedule, but I was on the smaller fields. It is tight. Let's put it that way. But the bigger field is for the most part is open.
And we practiced in Worthing several times for my.
Correct. And that, and I don't know if that's going to be another option again. They have two fairly decent fields over there. And,
Yeah, it is. It just wasn't enough.
Right.
And my next
Which
question,
stinks.
and my next question is, what would we do, put in place so that a 10U team doesn't do exactly this? Because if you allow a 14U team to do it,
and I
I
think
think the city's pretty hard pressed to put any sort of stoppage on a 10U team from doing
I
it.
think if we keep them in Park and Rec, we can control that because the Prairie Grass League, the league we play in for 12U, 10U, says in their rules they have to be considered a rec team where it is, and they explain.
So a 10U dad couldn't find another league to go be a part of.
Well, you could.
I mean, there's just,
That's been happening for years, Chuck.
but this is what you need to talk about.
So that's what we're
I
going.
don't think you can, you can't, every section could take, like, I'm gonna go take 10 kids and go have a team in the city, like, it would probably suck for our program if they take a bunch of every single one, but, like, it's one of the things, I don't know.
I don't know either.
I just think it's a slippery slope.
I think everyone here agrees.
It was easy when we would be here.
Yeah.
Talking about it.
Right, I agree completely.
I just think as a Park and Rec, I think you're hard pressed with your mission statement to exclude kids from playing on that team, and then you're also gonna have to talk about the funding mechanism. Typically, whenever you're a more competitive team, you're playing more games, so you would then have to raise the fees on the competitive.
And I don't know as if at least from my understanding from the people that I've talked to that would coach that team, they're not looking necessarily for that. They want to play in the same league, maybe the I-29 league, depending on, how that would work out. and they want to do their 3 tournaments that they did even last year. They did a wood bat one, they did the region/state, and then there was I can't remember, one other one in like Minnesota. They tried to travel to not play the same teams.
Yeah, I think they went down to the one in.
Is that what it was?
Wakefield, Nebraska.
That's what it
That's
was.
Wakefield, Nebraska.
Right, so it was that one, and then it was Iowa or Minnesota, just into maybe Laverne or something. The way they sound,
Mars,
maybe that could be. And they didn't want to necessarily change any of those things. They just, and that's what they said. So like when they go to the regions to play for that VFW and stuff, those teams have all been playing together for the whole year. So then when you get there and you've played 4 games together, things like that, it's a little tricky for them.
It is, because the teams consisted of pitchers, catchers, and shortstops.
Correct.
On the other teams, and now you got to teach them to play, and they've got to handle the fact that there's a shortstop ahead of them.
Right.
And now you got to be a second baseman, and you're a first baseman, but now we got a tall lefty, so he's our first baseman, and now you got to be an outfielder.
Right.
And kids are a little scorned, honestly. Even once they make the turning team, because now they're not playing. They're the stud on their rec team,
Right.
and now they're another guy.
Now, I do agree with what you were saying earlier, though. Like, the rec team, they maybe are kids getting tossed into a position that later on in life maybe will, all of a sudden that kid is now that big tall lefty and he's at first bet, you know what I mean? And that.
Right.
So I really like that aspect of mixing them together.
To finish my thought on that is when you're assembling the tourney team and trying to then compete with a bunch of shortstops, first basemen, pitchers, and catchers, you don't have time to gel as a squad. You can't build this whole hierarchy. When you start that in April, you actually have a chance to establish roles. You have a guy who knows what he's doing at second base. You have a third baseman who's confident in what he's doing. You have outfielders who know where the cutoff is and how to deal with playing outfield. Where if they're constantly playing on their rec team as first baseman, shortstops, pitchers, and catchers, they're not exposed to these positions, so then your likelihood of success with your turning team gets reduced. And having the turning team established early and playing together eliminates that because of the established roles, the practice time, the game time, and seeing how to actually have your team constructed positively. So we all know who the leaders are, we all know what our role is, we all know our position on the field, we can learn it.
I believe that was part of Mike's ask that day too. He was talking about getting sooner things figured out. So I mean, and we kind of figured that out with the April announcement. Yeah.
So, somebody's got to say something. If we look at what our options are, let's lay those out quick, and then let's flesh it out so we can come to some type of consensus, because this could go on all day.
Yeah. No, sounds like a lot, and there's a lot of back and forth, and there's a lot of people on the fence. I think.
Correct.
Yeah, I just want to bring up we do a survey every year for Parks and Rec on satisfaction, a few other things. And one of the things I would look for in this kind of instance, if we're going to make database decisions, is does that dissatisfaction show up in our surveys? And this is last year's survey you're looking at here. That weighted average of 1.98 indicates fairly good satisfaction with our programs. This year's is, I think, 1.89 or something like that, which is a little bit better. It's backwards, don't ask
I'll
why.
say one is good.
One is good, five is bad.
I had a,
Is that a 3-star review?
So we'll update it next year. But the whole, we didn't have nearly as many responses to this year's survey, so it's not quite as valuable data in my mind, but
is that
it
broken
does
by
line
age
up.
group, or is it just a?
I'm gonna try and figure out a way if I can break it up. If I can do it by 13, 14,
You should be able to pull it by who the coaches are.
yes, and, or age groups. We do ask what age group, so I'm gonna see if I can pull that.
Yeah.
But, that's one of the things I would look for in this kind of thing. This doesn't reek of an unhappy system. The other one we look at, whether they recommend a program to others. And 90% said yes.
Scroll down to number 12 there. That is the issue.
Yeah. 88% of respondents are unwilling to serve as a coach or volunteer for next year's program. Or gentle reminder that many of them will not have a choice on volunteering.
Yes, yes. Hopefully that is it.
I'll see if I can break it up by age group, but
No, and you know, and as Bill's was saying, like the things I think we're looking at are those top 12 going to probably go and create their own team no matter what? I think so, yeah. Is it going to continue that way in the future? I don't know.
I was gonna say, is this just a specialty group?
And that's what
Will next year be back to
Correct.
where we were?
And I would, to be honest with you, at least the rumblings I've heard, I know there's already like a 12-13 age group that they would like to play in. What do they call it? Like the 75-foot base league, like the. I don't know. What is it? You have to go to like Iowa and Nebraska to do it. Is that what it is? I know there's a group that has already voiced their opinion on doing something like that, which I do think it's an interesting transitional league and probably a good thing for kids to play that. But so.
There's a lot of age groups that are coming up, 10U, 12U, that have really talented kids and very competitive parents. So I don't foresee it going away.
No, what will happen is if you allow it to happen here is a dad at 10U will say, you know what, they're doing it at 14U. I want to take my group of kids, I'm going to take my 12 kids out of the Lennox program and I'm going to go play in a different league. That's exactly what will happen if you do it. If this
Ultimately, they can do it anyway.
Right. That's
So-
today.
So maybe we need to adapt some way.
Yeah, then it
Not-
just turns into the disaster
Well,
that softball was for how many
maybe
years.
we go back to we're Parks and Rec, and that's what we do.
And then our park and rec program will get decimated, and you'll have
Okay.
lack of participation. And then when the whole reason the system was set up this way
I'm not sure I understand what you're
But we're not trying to,
was to get kids to the Legion level, as many kids as possible to the Legion level. And if you start going to this travel thing, all that will happen is you will cut down to 14 or 15 kids per age group, and you'll lose a bunch of kids.
ultimately, our mission though is to provide Parks and Rec. I mean, we want to build that program, but if the kids aren't coming, whether we're allowing them to,
Well, then why don't you wait until the kids aren't coming before you start making the changes?
so we're gonna have this discussion maybe next year, and we're just gonna wait? Or
I just don't understand how if we keep our program strong, how first off anyone would find any time to practice on our field except during the day.
But I don't know that that's,
We're not really adding team, it's just, is the team in rec or is the team independent? It's still the same amount of teams.
I think
in fact, there's one less team now, because it was 3 14U with a tournament team, and now we're at 2 14U with a tournament team. So there's actually one less team.
For practice time.
For practice time.
and that might be the question going forward, so if we say, hey, we're not gonna do, we're gonna keep it as is, and a group of coaches take a set of kids at 14U, and they create a team, maybe we need to readdress our tournament team, because we'll see where, and maybe that's, I don't know, to me, it doesn't seem like, hey, here's our set answer, we're gonna stick with it, we're not changing it. I think it's something that you're gonna, it's kind of a bummer to keep bringing it up, but I think it has to slowly kind of evolve. It kind of like it did 10 years ago. The big thing that stuck out to me talking to you, and this kind of ties into the data, was that a lot of people have asked you that, how you guys had such a decent baseball program. You guys are competitive here, there. That screams like, hey, we got something we're doing right. Now, does that mean it's going to be right for 20 years? Who knows? The sports that my kids are in right now, when I was younger, we didn't have wrestling, basketball, volleyball, all this stuff going on every single night until we were a certain age. So that's evolved. It might have to be one of those things where we kind of make a decision, stay flexible, stay open-minded, see both sides of it, and kind of go from there.
And the hardest part is kids are getting more, single sport players. It's evolving into I don't play sports, I play basketball. So they don't go out for football, they don't go out for baseball. We've had kids in this 14U that did not go out for baseball, that only did traveling, and they're probably some of our better athletes. And are you going to convince that kid to come out for baseball? Don't know, probably not. So I would like to keep the ones out that are out. I completely agree with that. But I would also like to keep them as a Lennox team versus, and that's the really, I don't know. There's no answer. And how do you stop them from going lower? No idea. I honestly don't. But
if you go back and look historically at whenever this happened, it did nothing but decimate the programs.
But it happened for 50 years before that.
Yep, and how competitive was Lennox?
They were pretty good. They've
Why
had,
did they
they've had
pull
region
from
state
T?
championships prior to this.
But what year?
94,
Okay, so we had
in 98, or 99,
the last state
they
championship was
got
93.
hosed on a foul ball that they should have won it on. I mean,
Where are we going with this? I'm just saying, since it switched to this,
there's competition.
we've had kids that have gone through and won state championships at every level. We've had 14 U state champions 6 years ago, but now all of a sudden it's broken.
It's adapting. I don't know anyone is saying it's broken.
Well, they are. They're saying it's broken and the kids didn't have any fun because they didn't win every game.
I don't know how to say this. For example, I coach on my teams, and we play a lot of catch at home, and this is an 8U team. It is very hard to go to 8U practice and coach my kid that can catch versus a kid that's never touched a ball before. I think in the 14U level, they're still getting that aspect of kids that are pretty darn good baseball players, can throw it pretty hard, and then you're on that rec team, and there's a kid that you don't know if he can even catch, and you're getting at that point, and that's, I think, that argument of like, at some point, kids have to understand there's a separation there, and I think 13, 14 is maybe that age because of junior high basketball. There's an A team, B team. Junior high football, there's a starting 11. I mean, you're starting to get to that. Wrestling, there is, this is the head wrestling guy in this weight class. If you want to be there, beat that guy, I guess. So, I don't know. So I don't know if 13, 14 is the perfect age, but it's got to be getting close, I guess. If every school does it around, all the other towns are doing it.
The big question is it for Parks and Rec to decide
Correct.
if that's 14 U is that age, or do we let it go on its own, see if coaches take a set of kids, see how it goes.
And I will say other towns are, like T, for example, they split theirs by age, and they are looking at not doing that anymore, talking with Portner, because of this thing. They lost a lot of 13-year-old kids because they were getting their rear ends kicked. The 14U teams over in T did pretty decent, but 13U, they said kids hated it.
So now they mix their 13, 14?
They're going to look at that.
Throw out a possibility, and I don't mean to sound mean or dismissive. Is it possible that this age group just isn't a very good team? Is that a possibility that we're not considering here, that maybe they're not state tournament material?
I mean, maybe not yet. That's the thing, right?
That's a possibility.
And they were like 500 this year, so I mean.
Which in baseball?
That's the tournament team, or that's the?
That was the tournament team.
What was our rec team records?
Yeah, that'd be.
Like
maybe one or two wins out of
all 3 teams.
Oh yeah. Well, each team probably snuck in 1 or 2 there, and that would be against. I mean, like Dakota Valley, I think has an A and a B. That would probably be against their B, and Beers. So I mean, they did have a win or 2 here or there, yes. And I don't know. I completely agree with that statement also.
And we don't play each other at all.
No. They try to.
Why couldn't we do that? Because then you're playing.
I think at the younger groups we do.
The younger groups adjust, correct? And that's not scheduled by us. That's scheduled by Prairie Grass League. Does all that, and they try to get everybody to play each other at least one time, kind of thing. Because in the tournament, technically, I mean, you could have a Lennox Riley team get first place and a Lennox, who is a Veering team, get second place. I mean, in the tournament team. In the prairie grass.
We played an 18 inning marathon instead of that.
I guess what's our reason for, like, why wouldn't you play each other team twice a year, and then you're kind of, then you have some competitive games mixed in there, and I mean,
I don't, and like I said, that is, I don't even know how there's not a league for that, like those, like Beersford and Dakota Valley and Tri-Valley and like Vermilion, I don't know why there's no league. That is
the same reason
That's
why there
surprising.
isn't the Legion.
It's loosely called the Southeastern League.
right, but there's like a team that migrates between, I don't know, it's an interesting, I would completely agree with you. I don't know why there's not a set.
Because it's a volunteer organization.
Correct.
Sandlot setup.
Just,
It is, I mean, it is. And those coaches get together and they're like, does anyone have this day open? Oh, I do. Oh, we've already played it. Whatever. You know what I mean? And that's really how it goes. What do you want to do with that? Well, we played at yours, and now let's see what, and that's honestly how they do it. I don't know. I will say that numbers are going to only grow, at least, I mean, like, for example, 8U, I think there's like 60 some. 10U, there's like 40, 12U, there's in that 30, and 14U is about that 35, 30, to 40.
It's typically as you move up.
About 10 kids a section.
and I think really the way we've maintained good numbers in the 12 and unders is by offering a tourney team. Because if you don't offer competitive baseball and a chance to go compete at state, people will leave.
For sure.
So I think that's been that. If there's a 10U team that wants to pack up and leave, they'll pack up and leave no matter what's decided here.
I think what holds them back is they cannot go to VFW and play in a state tournament.
Sure they could if they're all Lennox kids.
But they have to sign it. I think they changed that rule.
It's not, because there's a Madison team that was a bunch of kids from like Madison and the towns around there that don't play. They're called the baseliners at the 10U level. It's all based, I mean, it's kind of like, and here's the deal. These kids that think they're going to leave when it comes time to play Legion baseball, like if they go to Sioux Falls and they lose in the Sioux Falls, they have to come back and play Lennox if they want to play American Legion baseball. Otherwise, our Lennox American Legion coach has to sign a release to allow them to go play in Harrisburg or Sioux Falls or anywhere else for American Legion baseball. So, I mean, it's not like their hands are kind of tied at that level anyways. And they all play together at that level anyways, so I think I made my opinion pretty well known that I think we run a heck of a good program. I think we've had a lot of success with it. I'm fine with talking about change, but there will be coaches at your younger levels that once they see this writing on the wall, that once you get to 14U, you can just pick whoever you want to go play. It'll start happening at our younger ages.
Are you one of those coaches?
If my kid's one of the better, if my kid's one of the better kids at the 10U level, and I know once it hits 14U, that I can quote unquote take the talented kids anyways, why wouldn't I start at 10U? That's what we've done in basketball.
The reasons are quite apparent. There's a tourney team already.
There's
practice fields here. There's availability for your kid to get there without you driving him around, driving him somewhere because he's 10 years old.
Well, but I'll just start a team in Lennox with all the good Lennox kids, and then still get the same opportunity to use the field.
Not if you're involved in that
As
decision.
everyone else.
How is it different now?
I think a 10U team is going to struggle. I think a 10U team is going to struggle to find a league to play in unless they want to go somewhere. I mean, does that make sense? Like Prairie Grass League is a rec-based league. So I think what would you have to go to, SEBA or something? I mean, things like that, to where that cost is going to go up quite a bit, which I think there are definitely parents willing to pay that, obviously, from, softball, basketball, everybody pays that.
Yeah, everyone pays $1,000 a year.
Right. I just think you're going to lose, like you're saying, that home, you're not going to play on Lennox Field because SEBA's you're going to play it all in Sioux Falls and all, which that does happen in other sports too, and I agree with that, so. I don't know.
I think what would probably happen is you just have guys that go to maybe 2 tournaments every month and play 4 or 5, 3 to 6 games there.
Right.
Get your games in and move on. That's just my opinion.
And I think the adaptability of Park and Rec is what has made the program successful. The ability to think outside the box, to 10 years ago develop the opportunity to have a tourney team and recognize that need. It's, to Tyler's point, we need to keep a flexible mind as to how we proceed, because we've got a different set of circumstances than when it was, I think, decimated by the group 10 years ago. We've got a whole different set of circumstances as I laid out. The head count is completely different. It's a whole different deal right now with our head count. And does that give us this opportunity? Does this give this age group this opportunity to move forward with a different direction, or at least to be entertained by Park and Rec? So then where does it fit under Park and Rec? That's the next part of the conversation, is it's its own entity, because it's not under the same guise as the Park and Rec program. The 13-14 that's still run by Park and Rec will not be tourney, it will be rec, and it will be inclusive. The group that goes forward in its own direction would not be under your purview as Park and Rec. It wouldn't be a city team. That's all what's expected and hoped for, right?
Well, like right now, they want it to be under the city, just, it would be it would be kind of classified as an A team. I mean, is that what you're?
But the problem is, that's not what.
Correct. And we do it, I'm assuming you shared that with the city council, the thing you kind of had created for the policy.
Yeah.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
And so we kind of tweak that thing to approve it, correct? And that's what would be, it would have to be approved to make the tourney, I don't know how you even define that thing.
The challenge with that, and I keep telling myself, I'll only say it one more time, it's completely inconsistent with the mission statement.
Correct.
Parks and
And
Rec. That's our discernment.
And that's what my first point is, we've already kind of muddied that water. Where's that, like, well, now we shouldn't do that anymore.
So here's in competition now, or are we Parks and Rec?
That's the question.
And then another question Kelly brought up was, all these coaches are coaching that team. Now, where do we staff our coaches for the 13-14? Because that's probably something that would need to be.
That's why Steve's got this concession stand sign up.
There's gonna be so many
coaches, we won't know what to do. We got 6 coaches on this team, and 7 forget.
Doesn't matter about their experience. I mean, you just find a dad that's gonna coach them, and that's unfortunately whenever you.
That's what we do
take the
now.
Yeah, but when you take all the
But
talent.
if there's
Because
no one
how are the
around
coaches
too.
split up last year? It's usually a dad that knows, a couple dads that know something on each team.
Well, at first we had 2 teams, and there was going to be roughly like 16 to 17 kids on those 2 teams, and they split into 3 teams. And at that point, we had asked pretty much everybody, and one dad's finally like, well, nobody else will do it, I'll do it. And that's what, and I mean, you did that at T-ball, we did that at T-ball, we did that at 10U. Trust me, I asked a lot of people to coach throughout everything, and that's going to be an issue no matter what, I guess, is my thoughts. Is the coach going to maybe know the most about baseball? Probably not.
But is there a contingency if no one says yes?
No, there's not.
And I just,
There never has been.
It's begging.
But-
It's just begging somebody.
Right.
Yeah.
You make it that way, you tell them either a parent steps up, or unfortunately, we can't facilitate a team.
Right, no, and that's
And
essentially what
we've
happened.
had to have that discussion every year.
Yep.
okay.
We had, for probably about 5 teams between softball and baseball last year. It was like, if nobody's going to do it. We had to do it for soccer, even on 2 or 3 teams this fall soccer.
I do like the explanation numbers and keep them at that 10U, but give them a little competition, but not push the limits too far to mess with, you know, our title as Parks and Rec,
Correct.
where they're still doing rec. So, I don't know, that's just the way he said it, it made sense. I never heard it that way, so,
Oh, no, sugarcoat it, there's kids that are upset that they get left out the travel, or the
Oh,
traffic.
for sure.
So
And that's,
for sure.
that's gonna be,
And it just pushes them to, I think, practice harder
and that, you'll never.
I think you're gonna have that no matter what kind of tournament team.
Really?
I mean, no matter what sport you're gonna build, there's kids that are bummed out by other butts sometimes, so,
Right, for sure.
I mean, that happens. I think some of this is that this is the first year, as far as I know, that we've had coaches come forward with issues, or they, as they see it, something that needs to be changed. In my line of work, we have like issues come up every day. And I have a new commander that is really hard pushed on, like, it's not jump to a conclusion. Nothing says we can't take data. We have a good program. Doesn't hurt that we wait. You know, if we go over this year and see how this goes, now that we have feedback there, maybe our survey can be a little more tailored to gather that data. And then you have another year to kind of see, hey, okay, they did go create their own team, so there's more data to gather on that. How did that look like for us? How did, you know, well, they did go create their team. Maybe his feedback's different because he has a different group of guys. Maybe the survey we can put back like more specific questions on, just to see what the public would want and the parents. Hey, what would you think about tournament team? And so all those are like gathering points, rather than saying, hey, we had some coaches come in off season, who wants to make a change. You know, you're jumping off a horse by its rump. I don't know. My input, I think.
Yeah, I think that's good input. I also, just per Kelly's comments, like, what else can we do to make it more fun for the kids? Like, how can we schedule more competitive games? We've been doing the same thing, sounds like, year after year.
Right.
Is there another way to attack that?
I don't have that answer. I mean, I don't know what to say. I don't know if there's more teams like, not necessarily, because that's kind of southeast, if we would go west to, you know, those types, but I don't know.
Our amateur team plays in a league that has 10 teams. Every single one of them has a 14U.
Right.
But they're all north. It's Del Rapids has a team.
They're all like,
Andrew has a team. Nova has a team.
Right.
Humboldt has 2 or 3 teams.
That's that I-29 league where those are competitive.
Those are just their same kids, just split up on teams.
Yeah, they have A's and B's though, is my understanding, at least from talking to
Well, the 14, the Hartford guys, I know they split theirs up into
13,
14.
14. Correct.
13.
Right. And that was brought up at 1.2. The hard part about that is we aren't consistent enough in our numbers yet. I think that would definitely be something in the future to probably look at, and to where you could do something of that aspect too. But right now there was, it would. I like what you said, Tyler. Maybe this is a 1-year fluky type thing, and we got to ride it out a little more. I do like that.
At what meeting was that presented to me?
I think it was June.
The policy?
Yeah.
When that came from Park and Rec. Park and Rec would have been in November?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Was it November or was it October?
Well, I'm
That's
definitely
been
not
the policy,
I meant it
I just had it added to the agenda so we could talk about it. I watched the
Okay.
meeting.
That was just recently, but I.
There was a recommendation
Yes.
to council,
But we
yes,
tabled it.
right, but when was that? I want to reread that.
I think it was November,
I think it was
whatever.
I think we did an
Let me
exec.
pull it up.
Did we do it next time?
the coaches
I think
and
so.
things came
I
in.
think so, we could.
July maybe.
Like, Ike and them came in June.
Is that what it was? June? Okay, I was gonna say. So it was right towards the end of their kind of
Yep,
season.
yep.
And then it was pushed out for a couple months.
Right.
Yeah, it was brought up in October when I was here,
Yeah.
and then
I'm gonna say it was
in November it was the push, and then right after that meeting, I think you typed up, hey, here's what it would look like, I'm gonna present this to the council.
And then
And I think you emailed us like, hey, just so you guys know, here's what it looks like, I'm gonna present this as a policy. And then
November 7th, maybe, Bill? 2nd.
On that park board.
Yeah, I don't see the policy actually on there though.
What day did we have that all-day session for the economic development?
That was like October 6th.
Because that was the same day.
No, that was
the same day.
November 8th, because that was,
That was the same day, because Riley called me when we were at that.
That's right.
so the park board was on the 7th.
7th, yeah, November 7th.
But I don't think I remember seeing anything on our agenda.
No, I think it was added to.
It was added.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Check your email. I think it was sent in an email. Around that date.
I don't think there was an email that went out. I think it just got added to the
Are you
agenda.
talking about the most recent time when we talked about it?
There was no.
Yeah, no, I made a motion to add it at whenever we approved the agenda. And some of these-
Right, but there was no.
There was
no
nothing
updated-
ever put on board docs about it.
No.
It'd probably be in the meeting minutes at the next meeting.
But like I said, I don't remember seeing it proposed change.
all the policy.
I don't remember seeing that.
And they,
We never.
Nate wrote one up and then he got a consensus from the council and the council's consensus was 6-0 that nothing was going to change. So then Nate
That's what happened.
put together a proposal and brought it to the Park and Rec board and it's never come back up to our board.
I think you're right.
We went back to the park board and
So we got further.
basically said, like, we
That's what
should,
the idea is like, hey, we need to get.
they debated it again, but we're still
And
kind
that's
of
when
leaning
this
towards
kind
of-
the change.
This kind of came about
Yep.
out of that.
here is what Nate typed up.
I was trying to find that.
He does, doesn't he?
Me?
There you go. Alright.
Sorry, don't put that in my review.
Too late.
Gold straight.
Just lost half a star.
And, you know, I don't want to speak to baseball talent. I know that there was not as many 14-year-old players as 13-year-old players on that team. So I don't know, if that age gap there is a little, maybe this year with more 14 age kids and, that 13, the 12's going into 13, I think there'll be a really good, pretty big group of them. So maybe those teams will be a little more competitive,
If they stay.
if correct.
You want me to put that up on the screen so everybody can see it?
Makes the most sense.
I emailed that, correct?
Correct. What day it was, I guess.
I was trying to find mine too.
November,
November 9?
November 29th. Because I think right after that meeting, you went on your, hunting, you went hunting a couple times.
That doesn't sound like me.
You're
We've already pinned that down.
It wasn't ice fishing, I know that was improvised.
I couldn't have been
And
me.
Keegan was gone from school, I remember.
That's right, he was gone.
Yeah, Keegan was, where'd you go? Fall River, right? Yeah.
Pheasant feeder?
That was one feature.
So I guess I don't know, at city council, it was pretty unanimous that you did not want to go forward, or
At that time.
at that
I didn't
time?
watch the video, was there a lot of discussion on it? Just curious.
Yeah, there was. It was more or less just trying to get a feel for what that meant and having this discussion as a result of that. Because I don't think any of us really fully understood how that was going to work. And the way this is written, it is to keep the 14U tourney team still under Park and Rec, rewording the Park and Rec bylaws, I'm not using the right word. Policies to allow that to happen. So this hasn't made it back to council yet for us to look at. And I just want us to do the right thing.
And I think Tyler said it, like, when we first brought this up, I was like, this is not park and like, no, we need to just not do this. And then I was kind of like, yeah, we should do this. And so like, I obviously don't have a vote tonight. I just think we need to decide so that those people can make their choice as to what they're gonna go for. I'm back and forth every time. I like what you just said, Tyler. I'm on the like, let's wait it out a couple years, but I don't want to be behind the 8 ball type thing to where, okay, we waited out and then it went poof.
Well, if they're gonna go anyways, whether you make any change or not, the easiest solution is just to let them go and say, go start your own team and follow the procedures that have been put in place for teams outside of the Park and Rec program, and that's the easy solution. Then, like I said, once we open, I mean, because I think if we open that can of worms as a Park and Rec board, I just think it pushes down to the younger levels, and then you kind of have to include them and let them do whatever they want under the auspice of the Park and Rec board. Whereas at least with this, they're not under anybody if they go out on their own to do it.
Well, as this is a work session, no official action will be taken tonight. I think it's been a valuable discussion to put in front of this group in its entirety, and then now our park, we trust and count on our park and rec board to steer the ship.
I got one other crazy idea.
Bring it.
Does it have to be all or nothing?
No?
And what was going through my head is like, could you almost have like a split squad type of scenario where you have a schedule of games with your normal rec team, but then you also schedule or allow that tournament team to play a couple more games as a unit
Already. They
Right.
played 10 games together last year.
in tournaments, right though?
No. They played 10 games. They played 7 games before the start of their tournament, their state tournament qualifier, because they went 5 and 5 overall and 1 and 2 in the district or region tournament.
So some of the kids are playing the 10 rec games. Another 10, 11, 12 kids are playing an additional 7 games up before that BFW tournament, right?
Correct.
So they're essentially just wanting the team to stay together.
So they want 17 games as one team instead of just the 7.
Right.
Just a
Yes.
few more. And
See,
the
I
practice,
wasn't aware of that either.
the practices are, I think, the other part. Like, I think that team maybe had 2 practices or something like that. So, I mean, I don't know.
He did, yeah, we were talking about Texas too.
And that comes into that play because, like I said, like, you know, with high school sports, there's a basketball night every night, there's a football night, and if you don't go to those, then are you going to be able to play on those teams? You know, that
Well, it
also
sounds like if you don't go to baseball practice, you get to play on the baseball team still.
I agree. But that, when you only got 12 teams.
So are these kids maybe spreading ourselves a little too thin with these school programs coming into the summer? Because I can't imagine our football program being real happy if the baseball coach said, hey, I'm going to go to a baseball camp on the 3rd Friday of October.
I'm going to plead the 5th.
Yeah.
I know.
I completely agree with you. I don't, but you're never going to stop that trend. So.
It's like you're never going to stop the train if they want to do their own travel.
Well, this is still a club sport, where that's a high school sanctioned sport. There's a big difference.
So the concern was that we just listened to the coaches' concerns and moved forward with it. And there really wasn't a need for it. We basically just heard their concerns.
Correct.
And changed.
And that was even, I think Kurt coached Junior Legion. He was in here on that also discussion, and he said that the level of play that he sees at that level is kind of dropping. Now again, is that just an age group thing of maybe we don't have quite as talented of kids? Do we need to give that, like Todd was saying, maybe a little more data in there?
Let's call a spade a spade. The Brock Anderson and Zach Fox, the Leesinger group had 11 boys the same age that could all really play baseball. Correct.
No, hey.
I mean, they were an anomaly.
Right.
They were a really good group of kids that came together. And guess what they did at 14 in baseball? This exact thing that we're talking to change. And the reason they got good is because then they had 8 kids who could pitch because they were split up on 2 different teams and got to pitch more.
There's some dynamics that went into that. That's not how that group was held together.
Developed.
Yeah. And how
They were split up before.
how other ages weren't quite given opportunities because they weren't them. But that's just the other side of this coin we're now flipping.
They were split into 2 teams, not by age, is what I know.
I don't know if we haven't. So you're saying that like they came in and said their, concerns and brought them to us, and we just like said, oh, we're gonna stay where we are. I don't know if that's accurate because I feel like
There's been a
we've
lot
talked
of
about this for 3 meetings.
Oh, yeah.
We wanted the city council, maybe prematurely, maybe not. That was more
Well,
like,
that's what I'm
hey,
getting
let's
at.
just get a vote out there to see where everybody's at.
That.
And then that was kind of to get this ball going, right? And I was really on the fence back and forth. So I think a lot of people are like that, where they're, hey, let's do it. Hey, let's not. Like the way Steve says, that's like me. Like my wife's sick of hearing me talk about it. You just one day you're this and one day you're that. And I'm like,
Well, there's positives to both.
You're right, and that's why I tried to like lay it out. I mean,
I think people have put a lot of effort and time and like really, everybody here I think wants to do the right thing for the kids. That's where the big question is.
Well, which group of kids are you going to do the right thing for? Are you going to do the right thing for the 12 talented ones or the 28?
See, and I think that's where it needs to be all collective. It needs to be, we gotta do the right thing for everybody, and I think that like, kind of where I've sat, I've tried to come again with an open mind, but have got to the point where I think that, the big thing was with like, that got me thinking about data and time frame. Do we need to make a jump decision? And as much as I'm back and forth, I think that we need to wait it out. If they would come in multiple years on it and say, hey, we've had this issue for this long a time, okay, maybe there's something we need to address. Or, from that point on, I think it's pretty acute right now to where it sits. So I don't know. I don't know if anybody else wants to give their, I don't know if we're not voting, but you can give your open opinion kind of just to know where I stand is like, I think it needs more time
I
before
agree.
we make any big adjustment.
What gives the most amount of kids more opportunity? Which one?
Leaving it as it is.
For sure.
What did
I guess I would be the devil's advocate and say that maybe the kid, so if we split the 5 best, the 6th kid on this team is never going to pitch. If we put all those kids together, then that 6th kid might be the best pitcher on his team. So I don't want to jump to that, like, you know what I mean? Does that make sense? So it's defining opportunity, I don't know what you mean by that. So
Opportunities to be successful, I would argue that the 16th best player being your number 1 pitcher going against the same team that your best 15 kids play isn't setting that kid up for success.
and I would think we're not successful right now, I guess, is it?
The other
I
point
mean,
that-
we won 2 games in the whole in the
Yeah,
league.
the thing that Kelly brought up with, like, the fact that we were non-competitive for most games, well, now those other 2 teams are gonna be
Even
15
worse.
run.
I agree, but yeah.
So it's gonna, those kids are gonna quit. I mean, they're not gonna.
And I completely agree, and that's what I was on there.
And my whole thing is like, a 14-year-old kid, some of them are shaven and 6 foot, and some of them are 5'2", and 3 years from now, they may grow into being
Right, I
the best kids, and
completely
if they don't get that chance to.
That opportunity.
What-
That's like what you said.
What do we ultimately want kids to get out of this program or participating in sports?
What do we want?
What do we want
to
to
sign
sign
up
up?
to volunteer?
To provide an opportunity to learn and develop the basic mental and physical skills of various recreational sports.
Well, why? Why do we want them to develop that?
Well,
Is everybody going pro?
Maybe.
Maybe.
Only the ones on Riley's team.
The travel T-ball team has a real shot. But we want to learn leadership, right? We want to learn
Success, failure, teamwork.
work together either way, right? So there are other things that we're teaching in a losing season.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'll shut up again.
Thanks.
That was great. I'll piggy off you a little bit. I thought it was very interesting as far as your losing season. Mitch Mergen was here for one of our meetings to present a, I don't know,
Park master plan.
thank you, park master plan. And he kind of sat in the back and listened to our discussion about our 14U stuff. And he kind of said, hey, if you don't mind, I just want to give you an opinion from his Del Rapids. And he said he had a kid, wasn't the greatest #1 tournament team athlete. His kid, they said they got their butts kicked like the whole season. And you guys correct me if I'm just trying to summarize what he said. They got their butts kicked the whole season. He wasn't quite 100% sure if he was going to do baseball next year, and so he asked him like on the way home or later on, and he said, what do you think you do baseball next year? And he wasn't quite sure he was going to answer yes, and he said, heck yes. Like he said, yeah, no, without a doubt, he's going to do baseball again. He had butts. So that kind of comes from that too.
I think his
It's
kids
winning
are younger.
maybe, but
I want to say he was like 12 years old. I thought he was-
Yeah, I think
wasn't
10, 11 year old.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so I mean, he's close to that age.
I don't know, for me and growing up, and I think I'm trying to think in that era, in that range, like we didn't have baseball, but football for 8th grade and 9th grade. Like winning games is good too, but there's also that practice. Like that's part of it too, like with your buddies and the camaraderie and like there's an aspect there that like that was like something I'll never give up, you know. So that's something that we have in Parks and Rec that goes, what do we hope for them? Well, that's part of it too, building that team and working together and all those skills. So
Along with that, I know I'm trying to play kind of both sides, but I will agree that with something like that, and I think it introduces kids, like even at school, for example, when they all come back, after summer break, and they're like, oh, you were on the baseball team, and like, it opens kids to that new aspect of, I just don't have these 5 friends, now I have, I met you at baseball, and those types of things, so it makes more of a community a little bit too. For example, Worthing, they always had their own baseball team. Well, now they came here, so a lot of those kids that were in 4th grade over there, 5th grade here, met all the Lennox kids through baseball, and they moved, so it created kind of a little more sense of community and stuff too.
Friendships that they have.
Yeah, right.
6th grade, whatever they have over here.
It's fine.
Kelly, what are your thoughts?
Well, I'm just kind of listening, but I mean, my comparing baseball, basketball, I realize they're not the same sport. They're probably not even close, but my son, like last year, he didn't make the A team. He was on the B team, but he rocked that B team. I mean, he was a leader on that team. He got opportunities on the B team that he would have never gotten on the A team. And I wish that somehow we could do that with baseball too, where these kids who maybe aren't going to really shine on the field with those other kids, if they're on their own team, their own separate team, that they're able to really make some plays and really do something. I realize that they're different sports, but I wish it could be more like that, where you could make it fun for those kids, for all the kids.
So, and that was the original intent of having a tourney team, was spreading out all the players across the teams that you had, and then letting them play with their buddies, their schoolmates, and then letting them come together as a tournament team to have their competitive juices fulfilled. The issue that I expressed earlier was that we just, as a group, wouldn't have time to gel as a baseball team to really be the dominant force that they could have been. And coaches were left wondering, well, what could have been? if we played the season together, could this group have been the state champs if we played the season? So where does that sit? Where does that rest in this? Where's the value? What's the apex of baseball? It's not 14U. You know? So we have to understand the weight of this isn't nearly as daunting as it feels like. It's 14U baseball.
I agree.
Yeah.
And that's where that rec program comes into. Are we wanting them all to be state champions? Yes, but is that really the point of this?
And if a player and parents want to take that team, we're not telling them, no, you can't. They just have to make their own decisions on if they want to do rec stuff.
Correct.
And their concern was practice time. Right?
With the two teams, correct.
As it currently sits, yeah.
Yeah.
They never really discussed like they'd be worried about practice time. It never really was discussed that they'd take a team even go on that route.
Correct. At the original.
That was kind of like our well, they had the option to do this, and we kind of brainstormed on options that it would look like if we would keep the way we are.
And the survey speaks to me too, the one that you brought up.
Yeah.
For what it's worth.
This year's was pretty neutral for when they had 4 responses from that age group. One very dissatisfied, one very satisfied, one somewhat satisfied, one neutral. So, so looking through last year's, we had a lot, but you can look into the additional comments about why they didn't like it. And forgot about a little bit of a mess in 2020, right? That we did not have the best season. So I think that it's pretty obvious based on the comments that are with those 14 new responses that it was around the disorganization, so on and so forth. I didn't see anywhere.
That was before my time.
Really?
That half the stars back.
We might get up to it too.
Hey, if it's like one of the best and final six words,
Yeah, right.
No, I guess I would end with, I mean, it's like everyone has said it, everybody's a little, but Tyler's point I think sticks out is like, do we want to jump right away or kind of see how it goes, you know, keep it in the back of the mind and bring it up next, whatever it is, July, and say like, even call those coaches in and say like, you know, what do you think? Did it go better this year, worse? Is it another thing to consider?
I would say ask the kids.
I have talked to some of them, and they did not have a very good
I
time.
talked to all of them.
I can't. No, I'm not saying like all 50 kids. What do you want me to do? But like, you don't pay me enough. At the end of the year, that's like an hour.
Ask them how it went.
All the freshman group of boys that went out for football and cross country and that came across like how did baseball.
Not one of them had any fun.
They said it was a frustrating year. I would say.
So these are all the kids, this is their first year moving up from the 12U smaller field up to the big field.
No, not necessarily. There was honestly most of them were the older kids because those are the ones that are freshmen this year.
Gotcha.
It's tough to read that. I think it's tough to read that answer too, because if you ask a kid, hey, how'd the season go? If it's not a winning season, they're just like, oh, it was rough. You know what I mean? They're going to say like, well, I had a blast in practice. We got our butts kicked during the week. You know, I don't know. That's just kind
Did we have ice cream? Well, it was great. And maybe that is something to look at is like, I mean, as kids get older, can we give the 13, 14-year-olds a survey of some sort to ask what their opinion is? I mean,
Tell them to be
The parents are okay with it.
I mean, yeah, if it's an anonymous thing, I mean, I don't see why not.
Nothing's anonymous on a computer.
Sorry.
So consensus is it's probably not broken. Our program is fine the way it is. And our concerned coaches know that we're not taking it lightly. I mean, we are taking their concerns into consideration.
And that's the message I would relay to, you know, Ike and Steeler and Kurt and things like that. It's just saying, like, it's definitely a consideration in the future, but right now we're kind of content, I guess, to see how it blossoms into, I guess. So that is numbers.
And on that same, sorry.
Nope, go ahead.
I mean, and I agree with that. But I hope that we can, whatever they decide to do, I hope that as a Park and Rec board, that we could work with them as opposed to working against them. And that goes with the field time and all that stuff that had come up earlier. Let's not make it harder for them, almost as a punishment, you know?
We have a policy in place that addresses non-park and rec teams already.
Is there a policy?
I understand that, but it would be nice if we could work with them.
Well, I think the discussion is certainly of merit. If there's,
It's still Lennox kids, I mean,
right,
hey, that can be the competitive program, we can still have our Parks and Rec and our mission.
But then what you have to remember is then, we're gonna make that concession on the 14U field when we get the 10U dad that wants the same rights and regulations as our Park and Rec, the non-competitive team that wants to bring an all Lennox competitive team to Lennox, you gotta let him use the little baseball field too. I mean, that's where the problem comes in, because it will not stop.
How'd 10U baseball do this year?
Like in the state tournament. Okay. Maybe they got, what was 12U then? They were third or fourth. I was gonna say.
I think we might have been fourth. We were
Is
both
that what it was? I
third
was
or
thinking
fourth.
12U was third, and I knew you guys were in
And
that.
14U?
They didn't make it.
They didn't make, and that was kind of one of those, like.
I'm sorry, guys. You want a guy that doesn't lie, that's it right there. I'll shut up again.
Well, I think we have a pretty good discussion.
I agree.
I mean, that was quite long. I thank everybody for coming.
Yes. Like I said, I don't think anybody can say that it hasn't been discussed left, right, and center.
I think I've been part of 4-hour-long meetings.
Even Mitch was part of that.
I've been part of like.
All right, any other comments, or we dismissed?
Let's go.
Thank you guys.
All right, thanks
Thank you,
everyone.
Chris, and thank you. Likewise.
Thanks, Bill.